Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Township of Georgian Bay for our Planning Council meeting of Tuesday, May 14th, 2024. And I'd like to call this meeting to order at 9 o'clock in the morning. And in the spirit of reconciliation, we wish to acknowledge the enduring relationship between Indigenous peoples and the territories that they traditionally occupy. We recognize and deeply appreciate the historic connection they have to this place, the land, the water, the sky, and all that live around us. We are grateful for the opportunity to meet here, and we thank all the generations of Indigenous peoples to go back hundreds and thousands of years who have taken care of this place and who continue to care for it. And we want to show our respect. Hundreds of years after the first treaties were signed, they remain relevant today. May they guide our decisions and our actions. We commit to learn, to educate, to honor sacred places, and to take actions towards real truth and reconciliation. My wish. Council, any declarations of pecuniary interest or conflict of interest or anything else you think we should know before we proceed with this meeting? At least there's a little bit of humor off to the side here that the mic may or may not have picked up. Oh, yeah. Open forum. Do we have any open forum individuals for today? We do not. That means we go to a Planning Act public meeting. Oh, okay, one moment, please.
Yes. Sorry.
Oh, we do have open forum.
My apologies. I'm used to them all being tied to planning applications. We do have one open forum from Ms. Whiteley. And am I pronouncing that right? Okay, perfect. For application D24-03, which is item 7A, but it's not a public meeting, so she needs to speak during open forum.
Okay, please come forward to the microphone. Turn the microphone on, identify yourself, and the theory is 2 minutes. And seeing, I'm just going to make one caution, if I may, seeing which application you're referring to. I trust what you're about to say is in regard to what's in front of us today, not what is in front of the Committee of Adjustment later this week.
Yes,
yeah, but I don't want our council to discuss the minor variance application. You can make reference to it, but we will not be discussing what goes in front of the Committee of Adjustment, only what's in front of us today. If we have any questions, please. Thank you.
Thank you for allowing the opportunity to speak today. My name is Danielle Whitley. I am an architect at SVN Architects and Planners. I'm joined today also by Michael Mathis, who's a planner from our team, so he's online, as well as the property owner of 70 Points of View Road that we're representing, which is Heather Jessamine, and she's also online today. So we are here today just to answer any questions that you might have about our deeming bylaw application, and to clarify or provide some context on the application. As you can see on the screen, this is just showing the location of the property. So it's at, as I mentioned, 70 Points of View Road, just up the 400 on Little Go Home Bay. And our client actually owns two properties. There's a waterfront property as well as an adjacent property to the west. They are directly adjacent. The As you can see on the existing site plan, in red, there is a existing cottage and sleeping cabin that are located on top of a hill that overlooks the waterfront. And there's also a boathouse and garage structures, and this is all on the waterfront property. The west property does not have any buildings currently. It is vacant land, just a wooded area, and we would like to merge the two properties on title because the west property currently does not have any frontage, so we cannot build anything on that property. As mentioned, we have a minor variance for an application to build a new cottage. This is just on this next slide here. And we would like to build the sleeping cabin on the west portion of the property so that it is separated from the cottage and is more kind of embedded in nature in the wooded area. But to do so, we would need to merge the two properties on title so that it is treated as one. So yes, here to answer any questions that you might have about our request and provide any clarification that's needed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Will you be able to remain in attendance when the item comes up later?
Yes, absolutely.
While it's not a public meeting, I'm sure if we have any questions that you would be able to answer, that we would be, if you'd be willing to answer them at that time, if something comes up during the presentation, we would appreciate it.
Yeah, definitely.
Council, are there any questions at this time for Councillor Hazelton?
Yes, thank you for attending here. Question for you: you want to build a sleeping cabin a long ways away from the shore. Could you just share with us your strategies on why you think that's appropriate versus close and visible in the waterfront?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. So in the current condition, we'd be looking to rebuild the cottage on the existing footprint, and that is really to minimize kind of site disruption. But because it's located on top of a hill, there's only kind of so much area there that can actually be built. So we are looking to relocate the sleeping cabin also to provide a different experience so that the cottage is focused towards the waterfront and the sleeping cabin is really embedded within kind of the natural surrounding of the forest and the woods at the back of the property.
So I applaud your strategy. We have way too many people who think that the sleeping cabin should have waterfront access and visibility and therefore not really a sleeping cabin, but an additional extended second cottage-like structure. So I'm delighted to hear your strategy, and I think it's an excellent complement to a building that is waterfront.
Thank you.
Councillor Bochek.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. Just a quick question on the development rights of the parcel of property that you're considering building the sleeping cabin on. You said that there was no waterfront on that piece of property, so no development, but I'm wondering if there is development rights on that property as it stands alone because it does have road access.
Yes, so should have clarified that. Currently it only has access to a private road, and so our understanding is it needs to have access to a public road or else the waterfront in order for us to develop on that property. So for that reason, yeah, it's still vacant.
Great, thank you. Appreciate that.
I am not seeing any further hands. Oh, Councillor Jarvis, you have to get your hand up sooner, Councillor Jarvis.
My apologies. Thank you, Mayor, for your indulgence once again. I see there's an easement on the property dividing the two pieces. Will that easement still exist after if we confirm your request?
There's no reason for the easement to remain in place. So our understanding in the legal documents that we have, the easement's in place to grant access for the waterfront property to allow a driveway through there, because without that, technically can't quite reach the road.
I get it. So, okay.
So since they're both owned by our client, and if they were merged, we wouldn't need the easement anymore for any reason.
So the easement will no longer exist. Is that what we're saying? Okay, thank you.
It's not required.
Mr. Fackley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a point of clarification. So at this point in time, the applicant has not entered into discussions with the municipal planning staff regarding a consent to close any rights of way across the property. That certainly is a separate subject that I wouldn't want to start discussing today. Additionally, the lot addition that was completed in 2010 and the rezoning that was completed in 2010 is the challenge. So had this separate property remained in a separate zone, even though the lot was added, it wouldn't be a part of the waterfront because it was both an addition to the waterfront lot as well as rezoned to shoreline residential type 1. It became a part of the waterfront, and so it must front on the waterfront. So in order to realize development rights on that land, this is the most straightforward method in order for it to truly become a single lot, because the lot addition was completed, but the merger by deeming the subdivision, the lot out of the subdivision has not taken place. And so it really is a process matter that has stranded this part of the lot from development.
All right, I think we have to be careful not to get too far in depth to what's going to be an item on our agenda in not too distant future, perhaps. Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Mayor, and I was trying to get your attention. I could not get to my speaker or screen or camera, I should say, because the it was covered up with the presentation. So anyway, here I am, and I just wanted to say sort of a ditto to Councillor Hazelton's comments about the sleeping cabins, which basically a sleeping cabin in the front yard is like a second residence, and I'm glad to see that this is an application where the sleeping cabin is really just that, a sleeping cabin, and I certainly hope we see more of that in applications in the future, and our planning department will pay attention to this particular application and the merits of it. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, and with that, I think I'm going to close the open forum section of our meeting and go into the Planning Act public meeting. Thank you very much. And I pay close attention because the little speech I make before the Planning Act public meeting has changed slightly. I'm sure you'll hear, you listen carefully. This morning, there's a public meeting scheduled for one proposed zoning bylaw amendment. I will briefly summarize the procedure to be utilized for the meeting. First, the clerk will advise council as to when, how, and to whom notice of public meeting was circulated for the proposed amendments being considered. The clerk will also advise of the appeal procedures. Next, staff will advise of the purpose and effect of the bylaws and provide any other information that is relevant to the applications, and the clerk will summarize any correspondence on file. From there, the public will have an opportunity to provide comments on the amendments being considered. Please be respectful of time and be concise with your comments. All commentators are requested to state their name and address and sign in on the sheet provided. After the public discussion, the public meeting will be closed. Council will then have an opportunity to provide comments for clarification. I'm going to repeat that. To provide comments for clarification. I now declare this meeting to be a public meeting pursuant to Section 34 of the Planning Act to deal with the following proposed amendment. Zoning Bylaw Amendment File Z23-22 for Baxter Loop Lane, Vincent Cartier, owner, Andrew Pascuso, I apologize, agent. To our clerk.
Notice of the public meeting was sent by first-class mail to the respective owners and assessed persons within 120 to 800 meters of the property subject to the proposed applications, and to those persons and agencies likely to have an interest in the applications. These notices were sent at least 30 days prior to this morning's meeting. Included in each notice was an explanation of the proposed and effect of the proposed applications, and a key map showing the location of the properties or description of the lands to be affected by the proposed amendments. Other relevant information may also have been provided. These circulations were all provided in accordance with the provisions of the Planning Act and the Township of Georgian Bay Official Plan. Members of the public are advised at this point that unless they make an oral or written submission to council before council makes a decision on these applications, that the subsequent appeal to the Ontario Land Tribunal may be dismissed by the tribunal. Anyone who wishes to be notified of council's decision respecting the proposed zoning bylaw amendment must submit a written request to the planning department. Correspondence relating to zoning bylaw amendment file Z2322 was received as follows. Finance Department, no comments. Operations Department, no comments. District of Muskoka would not be opposed to the application provided that the appropriate development control techniques identified in the environmental impact study by Berks Natural Heritage Consultants dated September 2023 and peer review completed by Hutchinson Environmental Services Limited dated February 9th, 2024 are used to conserve conifer thermal cover, deer feeding areas, and movement corridors to protect the identified stratum 2 deer wintering habitat identified and potential species at risk on the subject lands.
Thank you. The municipal planner, Deb McCabe, on the file will now provide an overview of the application, its processing to date, and the purpose and effect of the bylaw. Ms. McCabe, to you.
Good morning, Your Worship and members of council. The application before you this morning is file Z2322, and as stated, it's lot 37, concession 10, and the owner is Vincent Cartier. Mr. Cartier is in attendance this morning as well. As you can see on the location map up on the screen, the entire property is actually comprised of 40.47 hectares. However, the portion that we're dealing with in the zoning bylaw amendment application is up in this corner here, which is 4.7 hectares in size. 3 new lots and 1 retained lot for residential purposes were approved by the Committee of Adjustment on March 7th, 2024. A condition of approval was the adoption of a zoning bylaw amendment. The amendment is to rezone the portions of the subject lands to recognize the sensitive land features as well as the future development of the property. As you can see, these are the areas on Baxter Loop Road where the lots are going to be located. And as you can see, Baxter Loop Road goes directly through this property and will provide frontage to these new lots upon completion of the road transfer to the township. So the proposed development does include 3 new residential lots and 1 retained lot with frontages averaging from 60 meters to 170 meters and lot sizes of 0.83 hectares up to a maximum of 1.68 hectares. The purpose of the EIS that was completed was to identify and characterize the natural heritage features and functions that are present in the study area, and to determine if potential impacts to those features and functions could arise from the proposed severances and future residential development. Through assessment of information obtained during field surveys, review of background information, and consideration of applicable policies and regulations, it has been determined that natural heritage features and functions are present associated with the presence of wetland, woodland, and rock barren habitats. The EIS was peer-reviewed by Hutchinson Environmental Sciences, and subsequently a response to the peer review comments was received by the township from Berks Natural Heritage Consultants. The township's peer reviewers were satisfied with the response and recommendation, and the new lots will be subject to the zoning bylaw amendment that will amend the current zoning on the property to reflect the sensitive land features. A hydrogeological evaluation was also completed and undertaken by Dymond Consulting, Inc., dated May 18th, 2023, and peer-reviewed by Hutchinson Environmental Sciences. A meeting took place between the township and Dymond Consulting and Hutchinson Environmental to discuss the peer review comments and reach a resolution to the satisfaction of the township. The outcome of the evaluation and peer review comments, the recommendation that was brought forward is the treating of sewage effluent at the source, locating wells, cross-gradient or up-gradient of sewage disposal systems, and encouraging disinfectant of the water to each dwelling. Pre-treating the sewage effluent and ensuring ultraviolet treatment of the well water should minimize the risks of any adverse impacts on the environment and drinking water quality. As a consent agreement is a condition of approval for the provisional consents, the hydrogeological servicing study will become part of the agreement, and the 4 lots will require tertiary treatment with nitrate reduction for sewage disposal systems. The use of UV disinfectant for all the drilled wells to provide an added level of protection to the drinking water quality at this site will also be included in the agreement. As you can see on the screen, this is the proposed zoning bylaw amendment schedule. And upon approval of the consent applications as stated, a condition of approval was added that the owner be required to obtain a zoning bylaw amendment to rezone the lots as residential type 1, residential type 1 holding, and environmental protection type 1 to protect the sensitive land features identified in the EIS. These areas include rock barrens and wetland areas, as well as the associated buffers around these sensitive land features. The portion of the lots to be rezoned to residential type 1 holding is in order to limit the tree removal without additional environmental work being completed in advance. If any work is to be done in those particular areas in the future, additional environmental work will be required. The proposed development is in conformity with the policies in the District of Muskoka Official Plan and the Township of Georgian Bay Official Plan. As the new development is subject to the requirement of a zoning bylaw amendment, which is before you this morning, the proposal will be in conformity with the zoning bylaw 2014-75 as amended. Staff are supportive of the application based on a review of the relevant policies, as the proposal is consistent with the provincial policy statement, meets the intent of the District of Muskoka Official Plan and the Township of Georgian Bay Official Plan. Staff are satisfied that the rezoning of the subject lands will ensure that the newly created lots are developed appropriately and will have regard for the sensitive land features identified on each parcel. A further report and recommendation will be brought forward to Council from staff upon receipt of all comments received at the public meeting this morning.
Thank you very much for that. The applicant or agent for the file will now have an opportunity to present the application.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
My name is Andrew Pescuzzo. I am a registered professional planner here today on behalf of the owner of the property, Vince Cartier. I understand Mr. Cartier is in the audience participating as well. I will be brief because Deb absolutely killed that presentation, and there's not really anything else I need to provide other than some general Coles notes that the consents have already been approved and that the zoning bylaw application is a condition of the consents. And we believe that the recommendation will come forward at a later date for council to make a decision. There are no concerns that I am aware of to date from agencies or staff. I'm obviously participating today and interested to hear whether any neighbors or any of the public have any concerns. I'm happy to answer any questions. Just wanted to clarify again that no decisions will be made today and that a staff report will be coming forward in the future. There is one request I would like to make of council, and I'm going to make it now, but I don't expect a decision to be made on it. If you recall at the consent meeting, there was some discussion around the potential for the cash in lieu of parkland requirement to be switched out and replaced with the fact that my client owns a portion of Baxter Loop Road now, an alternative to cash in lieu of parkland. I'm going to be requesting on behalf of my client that the road be dedicated to the town, alternative to a cash in lieu of parkland submission fee. And that's all I have for my presentation today. Thank you very much, Deb, for your presentation, and I will hold on and to see if there are any questions from council or the public. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pescuzzo. Sorry for making a mess of your name earlier.
No problem.
Are there any members of the public who wish to comment, either in-house, I suspect not, or online? All right. Having heard all the comments from the public, we now turn it over to council, and we're going to start with Councillor Jarvis, please.
Got my hand up early this time.
I note that. Thank you. Therefore, you get to go first.
Yeah. My question is planning and apropos of what was just the comments just made about Baxter Loop Road. We've had situations here in the past with roadways that turn out to be on private property, unbeknownst to us for the last 150 years or whatever. Is the proposal that's been brought forward by the applicant's planner a reasonable request? And what is the situation with Baxter Loop Road?
Through your worship, the Baxter Loop Road portion, I've been in discussions with operations in regards to it. And as everyone knows, that at the time of a planning development application is when things like this can be cleaned up, correct? I mean, Mr. Cartier needs this portion of the road to be public, so to speak, in order to have these lots have open road frontage. Standard practice as a condition of approval on consents, as we know, is that we can ask for that road to be transferred to the municipality at the applicant's cost. So I leave it there. And I mean, it's obviously a council decision when it comes to a cash in lieu of parkland, kind of taking this as kind of give and take type thing, but I've never seen it done personally in the past, but.
So just to follow up then, do you think the request is a reasonable one, I guess? And
I think I'll let the director of planning answer that one.
Director Whitley.
Thank you. So through the Planning Act, the provision for either the dedication 5% of land for parks purposes or the dedication of cash in lieu thereof, 5% of the value, and that cash in lieu is in turn dedicated, to be utilized by municipality for parks purposes. So while there certainly is a benefit here to the municipality receiving the road, it is not a benefit that the township was seeking. It's a result of the need of the applicant to make that road public to get the severances, and the dedication of the road does not contribute to either supporting the township's parkland needs, either by way of land or financially. So from staff's perspective, we would not recommend accepting the road in lieu of cash in lieu of parkland.
That's not part of this anyway, right?
No.
Thank you.
And just further to that, would that be coming forward in the subsequent meeting as a, would be at that time that council would consider that question?
Through the chair. So the condition to get to contribute to pay cash in lieu of parkland is already a condition of the consent that was approved. So that condition exists. So unless council gives specific direction for staff to accept a road instead of parkland, the staff will simply proceed with working with the applicant to clear the conditions of consent, and that would include the dedication of the road for roads purposes and the receipt of cash in lieu for parks purposes.
Thank you. Mr. Pascuzzo, you have a response.
I appreciate all the comments that have come from staff, and I'm not sure, it's important for me to understand the process. I've sent an email request regarding the switch out with regard to cash in lieu of parkland of the dedication. I recognize I don't want to bog down this process in terms of the public meeting related to the zoning bylaw amendment, but I am looking at some point to one of the councillors to help with a resolution. And I don't believe now is the time. I'm just taking this as an opportunity to speak on the subject. So thank you again for the opportunity for me to clarify my position. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from any other councillor? Councillor Hazelton.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a question for you, Andrew. Did you ever get a response to your email of March 23rd or whatever the exact date was? March 22nd.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Hazelton, I got a foggy response that I would have an opportunity to raise my comment at the public meeting, but I have not really got any clarification on whether there will be a separate staff report regarding my request. And I had planned on following up subsequent to the zoning bylaw amendment meeting today with staff to formalize my request in more detail with regard to taking a staff report forward on this item.
Thank you for that. So I would like to address my fellow councillors. We have other examples, just actually down Honey Harbor Road, where we had a road that was discovered by accident that it crossed private land, and we went through the process and there were monies exchanged to minimize the pain associated with that issue. And I think we have that precedent and several other precedents where a resident is turning over land of the township, and I've forgotten what the calc is to get from hectares to acres. What is it, 2.5 times or something? But 2.5 acres in a hectare. Okay, so what we're talking about here is the development is about 12 acres of across 4 lots, and the applicant is going to be giving the township about 2.5 acres, which represents about 20%, not 5%, land in lieu of parkland, if you will. I think that given all the other things that are going on, and the fact that this applicant has been, I think, cooperative in this process of turning the road over, I think that we need to be a team player, so to speak, and support the request for the donation of the road in lieu of parkland or that 5% fee. Thank you.
So I think my question then to staff is, what does staff require in order to bring something like that forward?
Through the mayor to planning council, just discussing with the secretary treasurer. So what that would require would be a change to the condition as it's worded. So if there was direction from council, the matter would have to be brought back to the committee of adjustment to change that condition, because it was a condition imposed by the committee.
Appreciate that clarification. So, not that I want us to go down that road, but maybe we can do it fairly quickly if now's the time for council to give that direction. So, I'm going to go to our clerk. Can we draft a motion that we can then have council vote on with regards to? I'm trying to think what the right words are. To ask. I mean, is council applying to the committee of adjustment to change their decision? Is that in effect what's going on here?
Through your worship, yes, basically it is, because they're altering a condition that they imposed on the approval. Therefore, it has to go back to be reconsidered.
I'm just, and I apologize to all, but normally council doesn't give committee of adjustment direction, so I think we can only make an application for them to consider. Yeah. Councillor Bocek, followed by Councillor Jarvis.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor, I'm a little confused by this because I thought council's ruling was always supreme over any committee rulings, so that if we
not committee of adjustments,
not over the committee of adjustments. No. Thank you.
Councillor Jarvis.
Yeah, just a point of clarification. Based on the current status of the situation, what would be the amount of money that would be turned over to the municipality by the owner?
Through you, Mr. Chair, in regards to the cash in lieu,
Yeah.
it would be an appraised value. So technically, either we retain an appraiser to go out and appraise, or the owner does that, retains an appraiser that has specific requirements that we we need in order to accept that. So whatever the value is at the value of the lots at the day of the consent was granted,
Right, and it's a percent, what's the percentage again?
5%.
Anybody have a quick idea what the value of the properties are right now?
Well, let's call them $250,000 each. There's $1 million. The park and lieu is 50,000.
Yeah, so it's a good hunk of money.
I'm just,
Yeah,
and I have no idea what that's what the lots are worth. I'm just making it up as I go along here.
Yeah, it's typically, it would just be the 3 lots that were created, like the new lots. It wouldn't be the retained lots, so it would be the value of the 3 lots.
3 lots.
At
And
5%.
37,500.
yeah, or maybe more upwards of 75,000.
Who knows? Yeah.
My only other question, in addition to that, is it possible that we could saw off? In other words, per the committee of adjustment, if it comes to committee of adjustment, conveniently I sit on committee of adjustment. Is it possible that we could come up with a sort of a halfway, like, get the road plus a certain amount of money that is not the parkland dedication amount?
Thank you, through the mayor, to planning council. I think if, I'm sensing there may be an appetite to consider something, rather than trying to negotiate deals at this table now.
Yeah, right, yeah.
I think that, that guidance could be put back to the applicant and his planner to propose something.
And be, again, to committee of adjustment.
It would go back to committee of adjustment. I think it may help the committee, however, if there was a motion from this planning council to ask the committee to consider an alternative means of satisfying the cash in lieu parkland requirement by way of the transfer of the road or some combination of transfer and cash. I know that's awkward, and I know the clerk's probably trying to come up with some language, but so some general direction from this council as a request, not direction, sorry, I shouldn't use the term direction, as a request to the committee, and then that would allow the committee then to consider the specifics of a proposal that might come from the applicants.
Thank you.
Councilor Hazelton.
So we could potentially have something like a whereas clause saying whereas the applicant is going to be giving about 20% of the lots in the way of road land to the township, whereas normally it is a 5% land dedication, that council recommend or ask committee of adjustment to consider waiving the need for a 5% fee or land dedication.
I'm not sure that we need to go into that detail. We just because we simply want committee of adjustment to reconsider.
I understand that.
Leave it up to the applicant to do the math.
I understand that, but what I'm trying to do here is simplify the process for committee of adjustment so they have the facts that we're thinking about handed over to them as opposed to a simple blank request for them to reconsider it. So there's useful data in the context of this discussion that when passed forward to committee of adjustment will make their job easier.
Our clerk is busy crafting. Councilor Bocek.
I think this is an idea. I'm not sure it's a fairly good idea, but it's an idea, and it also creates a precedence where in the past we've used those funds that we've gained for parks to maintain parkland over the legacy of the property. We have lots of examples of that here locally. And so we don't want this to become something that other developers or other people can say, hey, you did it once for this guy, you got to do it for me. So I'd like it to be very site specific to this only, so that we don't deal with this in the future with when we do need those park funds.
The motion is going to make direct reference to this particular application.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm afraid I have no idea what percentage of our roads out there are on private land versus public. So, this is not a situation that normally comes up, but
No.
it does occasionally.
No, but it would be a concern going forward, and anything that we need to do at this point in time to make sure that this is site specific to here, and that other planners and other people don't use it as a precedence moving forward, it'd be critical to me.
To consider. We don't know the decision. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you very much, everyone, for your patience. Here is the draft motion, moved by Councillor Hazelton, seconded by Councillor Bocek. Sorry, I was going to make that Councillor Jarvis because they were the two that were keen on this initially. Be it resolved that council request a committee of adjustment to review decision, whatever it is, from B23-32, B23-33, and B23-34 for lots 37, concession 10, Baxter, Cartier, to consider alternative options as proposed by the applicant to provide payment for the 5% cash in lieu of parkland. So we're basically asking committee of adjustment to reconsider that aspect of their decision of last month. Director Whitlib.
And thank you, Your Worship. Just to clarify, so that would be a request. The committee could grant it or maintain the current condition. In which case, yeah, there would be no remedy for appeal as the appeal period on the consent decision has expired.
But we can still ask them to. So, moved by Councillor Hazelton, seconded by Councillor Jarvis. Be it resolved the council request the Committee of Adjustment to review their decision on B23-32, -33 and -34 for lot 37, concession 10, Baxter, to consider alternative options as proposed by the applicant to provide payment for the 5% cash in lieu of parkland. Council, all those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and we'll leave it at 6. But that's carried. Thank you. All right. Now, back to the matter at hand. I still have a motion for us to consider all the information presented today and referring the information to Township and scheduling the next meeting once they've done all their consideration. Any other questions on the original motion? Yes, Councillor Bocek, that's you.
Through you, Your Worship, and I'm not sure if this is apropos or not, but just a thought that came to my head that usually when we assume a portion or any part of a municipal road, it has to be at municipal standards. And in this case, if we're accepting this in lieu of, would this road have to be at municipal standards? Because then we become responsible for all the drainage and all the work to the road to bring it up to standards, or would it be at standards today because it is a municipal road?
Director Whitland, please.
Thank you. Through the mayor. So the request from the operations department was simply that the transfer of the road. It is what's known as a given road right now, meaning the township is already maintaining the platform as it is. We are maintaining it. The township simply does not own the land underneath the road. So there was no request to upgrade the road to a full standard by the operations department.
Great, thank you. Thank you.
All right. I'm going to read the motion and give anybody a chance for any last comments, but I have moved by Councillor Bocheck, seconded by Councillor Jarvis. Be it resolved that Council for the Township of Georgian Bay, 1, accepts all information presented at the public meeting on May 14th, 2024 regarding the Township Zoning Bylaw Amendment Z23-22 regarding the proposed rezoning of a portion of the subject lands. 2, refers all information to township staff for further discussion review with all participants and correspondence at the public meeting. And 3, township staff will not schedule the next meeting of council to consider the application until participants and correspondents at the public meeting have ample time to provide written comments and concerns if applicable. All those in favor, if there's no questions? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's passed, I believe, unanimously. Yeah, we'll put that there. And now this is new also in our public meeting. This concludes the Planning Act public meeting portion of the agenda. All comments, questions, and concerns raised at the public meeting have been recorded and will be taken into consideration by staff prior to a recommendation being brought forward. The public meeting is now closed at 9:47 a.m. Thank you very much, Councillor Hazelton.
Mayor, you drew to our attention that there was new wording at the front and new wording at the back. But in my tiny mind, I don't understand what is different without being able to compare it. Could we ask the clerk to provide us with a copy of the old wording and the new wording so that we can properly digest and compare this at a later date? I don't want to waste time in a meeting today. Thank you.
The only difference is the order of events. So I read the correspondence before the presentation and there's a conclusion paragraph at the end.
So nothing that's really going to impact our activities.
No. Absolutely.
Okay. I get concerned when you highlight all these changes and it turns out there's really no changes from our standpoint.
No. And now I get to hand you all this paperwork. And now we're going to go into the planning application staff reports. And staff report 7A is deeming bylaw application D2403 for 70 Points of View Road for Jessamine. And Planner Crackey will speak to this. And this is the application that we spoke to in open forum for everybody's reference. Mr. Crackey, over to you, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. With your permission, I'll share my screen.
I think actually you in fact require the clerk's permission, but I guess formally, please go ahead.
Your Worship, councillors, everyone in attendance here and online. My name is Jeff Kratke. I am a registered professional planner and member of the Canadian Institute of Planners, employed full-time by the Township of Georgian Bay as a planner. You've already heard from one of the agents here today. That's Danielle Whitley. She is an architect. The other agent is online, and that's Michael Matties. He is also a professional planner, registered. And Heather Lynn Jessamine, the owner, is also online. The subject property is, as Danielle showed you earlier, located just off the 400 on Little Go Home Bay. The important issue here is that lot 24 is part of a registered plan of subdivision. And although there was a lot addition in 2010 of this property and a rezoning to the SR1 zone, because the registered plan of subdivision exists separately under the Planning Act, the lot addition does not supersede that registered plan of subdivision. And so technically there remains two properties in this location. And again, given that the SR1 zone, which is already in effect on this west property, requires a shoreline frontage, it does not have frontage. As such, there is a need, if the sleeping cabin were to be developed on this current west property, for a deeming bylaw to be passed by this council, which removes lot 24 and the former shore road allowance, which is already merged with lot 24, from that subdivision plan, and allows the west property and lot 24 and the shore road allowance to merge together into not only one lot, but one property. And I had a presentation for you that I think Danielle has already covered off with respect to the development that's provided here. And so I'm going to skip ahead to the important parts for you to consider. And that is that this registered plan, M243, is already more than 8 years old. So it is completely within your authority under the Planning Act to deem that lot no longer a part of that plan of subdivision. And again, as I said, in 2010, there was a consent to sever, a lot addition, and a rezoning. And from a planning perspective, I would suggest that your decision is very consistent with the PPS. It is keeping with the intent and purpose of the District of Muskoka official plan and the Georgian Bay official plan, and with the Georgian Bay zoning bylaw, by allowing the lot coverage that is permitted on this lot, because again, the lot already exists. This separation of properties does not affect the planning at this date, other than the ability to move part of that density and lot coverage to those rear lands. And so I encourage and recommend strongly that council approve the deeming bylaw application before it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Council, any comments or questions with regards to this application? Councillor Jarvis.
Yeah, just quickly, thank you, Jeff, for this lot of clarification. We removed this lot from registered plan. Are there any other implications?
Your mic is not on.
I didn't want you to hear me anyway. But thank you. Sorry about that. So removing this lot from the registered plan of subdivision, are there any other implications that are created by that acceptance by us, our planning council, as far as further development is concerned? Does it restrict, enhance, change anything else other than the fact that we can merge these two pieces of property officially so that it becomes all part of one lot?
It allows the applicant to spread the lot coverage more evenly across the building envelope that exists on the lot, that is artificially now restricted by the simple fact that there are two properties. And so I would argue that it's actually better planning, in that you would otherwise be allowed to, any owner would be allowed to avail themselves of that lot coverage, but on that existing lot 24 only.
Okay, I understand that. And then finally, just one other question. It goes back to my easement question earlier. The easement is incorporated into that lot. It no longer becomes something that we have access to in the future?
No, the easement continues to exist unless the owner makes an application for consent to remove the easement. And that has not been discussed in any way, shape, or form. Whether or not it's appropriate, I cannot say, because again, we haven't discussed
Sure.
it, but it would be a matter for the Committee of Adjustment.
So down the road. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? I'm going to read the motion. I have moved by Councillor Cooper, seconded by Councillor Predko. Be it resolved, the Council for the Township of Georgian Bay approves, one, that bylaw 2024-043 be enacted under subsection 53 and 54 of the Planning Act to deem Lot 24 in Registered Plan M-243 may remain merged on title with the former shore road allowance in front of that lot described as Part 1 on Registered Plan 35R-9713 and may be further merged on title with lands described as Part 1 and Part 2 on Registered Plan 35R-23593 as requested by deeming bylaw application number D24-03, and that the clerk be directed under subsection 50(26) of the Planning Act to provide a certified copy of bylaw 2024-043 regarding the deeming bylaw application number D2403 to the clerk of the District of Muskoka. All those in favor? And that is carried unanimously. You're done. Thank you. Now we go to page 2. And we have an official plan amendment application 024-01 by the Township of Georgian Bay. And Ms. Montfort, you are the planner I see on file for this one. Please go ahead.
Through the mayor. On March 18th, the Council of the District Municipality of Muskoka adopted a bylaw to amend their official plan in accordance with OPA 58, being an amendment to add a variety of alternative notification measures to Section M9 of the District Official Plan. Planning staff brought Development Services Report 2024-65 for information purposes to a public meeting on April 9th, proposing an OPA similar to the district's. The proposed OPA aims to improve clarity and consistency in the public participation and consultation process, given the absence of newspapers. One member of the public spoke virtually at the public meeting expressing their support, and planning staff are recommending that council adopt the proposed official plan amendment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Council, any comments or questions, concerns with regards to this report and the amendment of our official plan with regards to notification? I have moved by Councillor Graziano, seconded by Councillor Hazelton. Excuse me. Be it resolved, the council enact bylaw 2024-044. Excuse me. Excuse me again. Sorry. Be it resolved, the council enacts bylaw 2024-044, being a bylaw to adopt official plan amendment 024-01 to add section I.8.5 alternative public notification methods to the Township of Georgian Bay official plan, and that bylaw 2024-044 adopting official plan amendment number 23 be forwarded to the District of Muskoka for approval. All those in favor? And that is carried unanimously. Thank you. Mr. Kratky, back to you with regards to hold removal application Z2401 for 2 Island 1130 Georgian Bay, Dymond. Mr. Kratky, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. And again, for someone who was not online, my name is Jeff Kratky, and I am a professional planner fully employed by the Township of Georgian Bay. Also here today is Michael Dymond. He is the owner of the property. And online, I believe, is Amanda Hoffman, who's also a professional planner with the Jones Consulting Group, and she is the agent. And I believe they're just here if you have any questions. I want to begin by apologizing. There was a typographical error that missed my eyes in my staff report. The property is correctly identified in my staff report, but in the title, it should say 2 Island 1120 Georgian Bay. So I apologize, Council, for that error. The subject property is located approximately between Roberts Island and Bosley Island in Georgian Bay. The Council considered related zoning bylaw applications Z2316 and Z2323 last year regarding this site, and it involves a tool shed being built just off the deck. One of the outcomes of Council's consideration was accepting my recommendation that a hold provision be added to the zone that required the development and registration on title of a restrictive covenant. Application Z2401 is consistent with the PPS. It conforms with the applicable policies in the subsections in Section I of the Georgian Bay Official Plan. And the condition of holding 14 provision is satisfied by the registration on title of that restrictive covenant. And there is the restrictive covenant in front of you, and that restrictive covenant sets out that the tool sheds shall not be used for human habitation, and it runs the maximum length of time of 99 years on the lands and does not diminish zoning, but is intended to ensure that no future property owner fails to understand the zoning bylaw requirements. And so once again, I recommend strongly that Council approve removal of the holding provision on this property. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Council, any questions or concerns with regards to this application? Councillor Cooper, please.
Really, this is sort of a repeat of something that I said earlier, but I'd like to commend our planner Kratzky on this particular application. I think the restrictive covenant is an excellent idea in terms of ensuring that residential uses is not applied to this particular building, shall we say. And I'm hopeful that our planning department will use the same kind of thinking when we have situations like this elsewhere in the future. It's very important to make sure that don't see residential uses, and there's a lot of situations where this is being perhaps not adhered to. That's why the restrictive covenant is a good idea. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? I have moved by Councillor Jarvis, second by Councillor Bocek. Be it resolved, the Council for the Township of Georgian Bay approves bylaw 2024-045 be enacted under section 34 and 36 of the Planning Act to remove holding 14 provision from the subject lands as requested by the Township of Georgian Bay application Z24-01 and delete the holding 14 provision from the zoning bylaw. All those in favor? And that is passed unanimously. Thank you. And now we are on to blasting permit application 24-01 for 134 Echo Bay Road. Director Whitliff, over to you, please.
No sound.
Thank you. Thank you for that. So now, Councillor Cooper, would you like me to repeat what I've said? I'm just getting underway, so happy to repeat it.
Yes, please.
Okay, so what we're doing, I'll just go back. We're going the location of the lands on 6 Mile Lake. And before that, what I was explaining to the committee was that blasting permits are the subject of a township blasting bylaw. They are not subject to the Planning Act or its notification or appeal period requirements. But the blasting bylaw sets out a public meeting-like process. So this is not a public meeting under the Planning Act, but there is an opportunity for the public to participate, and I'll explain what that's like as we move through the presentation. So as I mentioned earlier, the ultimate proposed development is to construct a new dwelling, replace an old dwelling on the lands, and that was the subject of a minor variance application A2341, which was approved in October of 2023. In this case, in order to facilitate that construction, the applicant also requires a blasting permit to excavate into the slope somewhat. The applicant has advised that the slope is currently a combination of both loose material and bedrock. They're hoping to be able to use normal excavation techniques to the extent possible, but they're unable to rule out the need for blasting, hence the blasting permit application. Blasting permit applications are considered pursuant to the Township's blasting bylaw 2016-064. And the image on the right, if you look closely, there's several things shown there. What you see in gray is the proposed new dwelling. And underneath it, in sort of a crosshatched pattern, is the footprint of the existing dwelling. And again, variances were granted to permit the size, height, and location of the proposed new dwelling back in October. Now, in terms of public notification, there's several requirements in the township's blasting permit bylaw. What you see here is a 700-meter radius surrounding the property. The subject lands are in the center of that circle. What the blasting permit bylaw provides for is notification within 700 meters. However, it also exempts properties that are not in direct line of sight to the blasting site from requiring notice. Staff interpret that as properties that might be behind the subject lands or otherwise hidden by topography or dense vegetation. From a practical standpoint, separating out properties from staff's perspective that may or may not have a line of sight is a bit problematic to implement. So what staff did here, erring on the side of caution, is we simply provided notice to every property that's within that 700-meter radius, whether or not it has line of sight of the blasting location. The bylaw requires that occur 14 days ahead of time, and those notices were provided 16 days ahead of time. The other provision in the blasting bylaw is that the applicant post a sign on the waterfront side of the property, and that's to occur during a specific time of year set out in the blasting bylaw between April and December. In other words, open water seasons, when someone might be out on the water and be able to view the sign. Now, in this case, the sign was posted 29 days in advance of today's meeting. Today would be day 30. The blasting bylaw does require 30 days. Communication between staff and the applicant and their ability to post the sign in time was fairly tight the way it worked out. So despite the applicant's best efforts, it's really with staff that we didn't provide the applicant enough lead time so that he could get his sign up 30 days in advance. He got it up 29 days in advance and made extra effort to do that. From staff's perspective, and it's spoken to in the report, that having considered that additional notification was provided through the mailing process above and beyond the blasting bylaw, and the fact that this development already went through a public hearing process back in October, that more than adequate notification has been provided that exceeds the purpose and intent of the blasting bylaw. So I would ask that the committee consider accepting the notice that was provided for this blasting application. And for committee's information, to date, staff have received no comments in response to that circulation from any surrounding landowners or anyone else with respect to the proposed blasting application. Going to move through some site plans here. So the way the blasting bylaw works is it controls blasting, regulates blasting within 20 meters of the high water mark. If an applicant is blasting beyond 20 meters, more inland of the high water mark, beyond that 20 meters, that blasting is not subject to the blasting bylaw. So on the image, the sketch on the right of your screen, you see a number of features. And let me see if you can see where my mouse is there. What that represents is the 104.5 meter contour. It's 20 meters back, 20 meters, that is the high water mark, excuse me. 20 meters back from that high water mark is the dashed line. You can see where my mouse is moving now. And it's the area in between that is regulated by the blasting bylaw. There is additional blasting proposed beyond the high water mark, and you'll see what that looks like in some other sort of bird's eye view, three-dimensional images that the applicant has provided. So within the regulated area that's subject to the blasting bylaw, they're proposing to blast or excavate an area that's approximately 21 meters in width, and going back about 13.5 meters into the lot for a total of approximately 173.2 cubic meters of material to be removed within the regulated portion of the property. Again, there's additional material that could be blasted beyond the regulated portion of the property further inland. This is just the same sketch you saw on the right, and the image on the left just has contours and a little more detail provided to it. But you'll see this as we move through the other sketches. What the applicant is doing is they are blasting into the side of the slope. They are not taking the top of the hill off, if you will. And these are the start of some of those images as I was referring to. So the image on the left, the red line represents the limit of the regulated area that's controlled by the blasting bylaw, and the applicant has outlined in blue the area that's proposed to be blasted. Again, there's additional area beyond that red line that could also be blasted and or excavated. And the image on the right simply shows a three-dimensional view of the proposed dwelling superimposed into the blasting area. I think you'll find the image on the left useful. So now this is a three-dimensional bird's eye image showing what the blasted area excavated might look like. And then the dwelling is proposed to be dropped into that depression. And on the right is simply a profile view. The red line on that profile view, again, is the limit of the area controlled by the township's blasting bylaw. The applicant has also provided a couple of images for context. These are some aerial images. The blasting area is in the center, and he's simply showing what sort of 10 meters beyond the blast site and 30 meters beside the blast site might look like, representing sort of safety zones adjacent to that blasting area. And the next image also is sort of the view from the water in terms of what 30 meters on either side of the blast site might look like. So that brings us to the staff recommendation. It's discussed in the report. Staff are recommending that this blasting permit application 24-01 be approved, and that the applicant and municipal law staff be advised of council's decision. The reason we're including municipal law staff is because should there be a matter of any enforcement or inspection, it's subject to the blasting bylaw, which is a municipal act bylaw, not a planning act bylaw. And so just so municipal law staff are advised. It's my understanding that historically, blasting permit applications were considered and reported on by municipal law staff. However, as the process is a planning-like process, internally staff discussions have led us to the point where it's probably more efficient that blasting permit applications be considered, as this one is here today, by planning staff with municipal law in the loop and presented at a planning council meeting. Now, I mentioned before I conclude that it's a public meeting process. So it's my understanding that the applicant, Mr. Wright, had registered to be available to speak and or answer questions. And I would also ask that the mayor as chair of the meeting also double check to ensure that if there's anyone else registered that may have registered or requested to speak. But again, staff have not received any comments to date from anyone. Thank you.
All right. All right. So I do see that the applicant is on our attendees list. And so has he been, he's sorry, he's now been brought over. Mr. Wright, do you wish to speak to this matter? And I wonder if we could stop the screen sharing at this stage, please. I also see a Mr. Spolnick. Are you here to speak to this matter or not, sir? If you raise your hand, then you can be brought over. Thank you. All right, he's being brought over. So, Mr. Wright, please go ahead if you have anything you'd like to add to the presentation. Okay, Mr. Spolnick, I now see. Mr. Spolnick, can you please go ahead if you have any comments to make on this application?
I do apologize for the lighting. I expect Mr. Wright perhaps is having some technical difficulties, but as he's attempting to log in, I will speak briefly. I am the architectural designer. I've been working on this project for many years. I'm going to speak to the design process first and foremost, just to provide some clarification and context to your worship and members of council. This design in this building was done specific to this lot, specific to the owners, specific to the shape, contours, and views of this property. It was done in consultation with the township planning staff. It was done by means of a topographical survey and determined that a variance was necessary to achieve approvals. Subsequent approvals were met. It was deemed that this design and the building as proposed is in keeping with the official plan. I believe that's echoed in the planning staff report for this application as well. And subsequently, it's been issued a building permit by the Township of Georgian Bay. Just a clarification on aesthetics. As I mentioned, the location of this building is specific to the site. It literally tapers to follow the grade. The ground of which it sits is quite a mix of loam, dirt, sand, silt, fractured rock, boulder, and certainly some bedrock. The amount specifically is unknown. Part of the challenge we're having is because the proposed building sits nearly entirely under the existing building, in order for us to quantify the exact amount required to be blasted, we would need to demolish the existing building. So I want to be very clear that any of the amounts and volumes provided to you represent entire volumes of material, not just blast rock. Also, I'd like to clarify that this is a low slope bungalow single-story building. This is not a two-story building with a walkout basement with a party deck facing the lake. This is hidden behind the trees, low profile, and has been the direction of the owner from day one. The building's been intended to provide them with privacy, which also will afford privacy of the building from the lake. All of the existing natural vegetation buffer in front of the building will remain, and there is no intention to alter that. Just as a relation to why we need the blasting, the structural considerations, at a minimum, we need a crawl space. We don't need a full basement. We're not asking for storage space. We're asking for mechanical services below the building, a crawl space. So we're not asking in excess of what we actually need to build this. We also need a crawl space to set the building low to grade, to keep it low to grade. The depth that we require also provides us stormwater management in terms of runoff and control for weeping tiles and subsurface water drainage. It's nothing in excess. And the entirety of the area in question that's going to be impacted by excavation will be entirely renaturalized at the completion of construction. If there's any comments or questions relating to aspects of this application that are not compliant, I would be happy to address them.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Wright, is there anything you would like to add for council's information?
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Apologies for my technical challenges in getting online here. I think the staff report and Dave have done an excellent job of outlining the important elements of this application. I think I'd only add that we've been custodians of this land for over 50 years. You'll have seen that we've maintained that lot largely in a natural state over those years. And as Dave pointed out, principal design feature from the outset was to try and retain the view from the canoe. It is our intention to return the lot to a fully naturalized state post-construction. At this point, Mr. Mayor, I'm happy to respond to any questions.
Thank you very much. We appreciate that. And I'm going to now turn over to council, and we're going to start with Councillor Cooper, please.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm not sure the Councilor Graziano was before me, but weren't you? I think so. But in any event, do you mind if I just go ahead?
Please go ahead.
After you, Alphonse. Anyway, I just would like to say a couple of things. Starting with asking a question of Director Whitlib. I seem to recall when I heard about the various applications on 6 Mile Lake that aside from spring flooding, 6 Mile Lake doesn't really have a high water mark because it's controlled. That's certainly what Councilor Bianco said for years. But I'm curious where this sort of notion of a high water mark came from on 6 Mile Lake. That's certainly what my memory tells me, but I wondered if you could comment on that.
Dr. Whitley.
Through the mayor, thank you. And if I may, I don't know if Councillor Cooper's aware, but we are having a hard time hearing him. There's quite an echo. I wonder if there's a second device on in the same room. Maybe that's the reason for the echo on, because the other remote parties are able to speak clearly. So, but I think I heard the question. And maybe what I'll do is go to the blasting bylaw, which simply refers to a high water mark as the measure from which the 20 meters is determined, and the blasting bylaw speaks to high water mark as defined in the township's comprehensive zoning bylaw as amended. So what we rely on is the watermark that's provided by Trent Severn in this case for 6 Mile Lake. Sorry, not Trent Severn, but the average high water mark as known for 6 Mile Lake.
So just for clarification, can you hear me?
There's a bit of an echo, but we can hear you.
So the average high water mark and the water mark or the water level are one and the same. Correct?
Effectively on 6 Mile Lake, yes.
Thank you. It's meaningless. In other words, calling it high water mark is somewhat meaningless. I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you. The second question was on looking at the diagram. It's called site massing. We're blasting out, I've heard that we're not blasting out a basement, but in effect, it looks like there's quite a depth, particularly back from 20 meters. What is the depth that's being cleared or blasted? I'm just curious. I didn't see that.
May I address?
Mr. Skolnick, please go ahead.
The specific amount I'd have to refer to my CAD files, but I don't believe that you're speaking to beyond the 20 meters, correct? I see. I don't know that that's applicable to this application. I can certainly get you that information. I think it's about 12 feet. The building will be set back, but it isn't a basement whatsoever. There is no basement in this building. It's entirely crawl space, and happy to sign an affidavit to that effect.
So effectively, there are no walls going in other than piers, is that correct?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
So in a sense, only piers are going in, there's no walls per se?
No, there is crawl space, so there are walls around because it's intended to be a winterized building, but it is not a headroom where one can walk in the lower section. It's for crawling to install ductwork. I believe I've allowed about 3 feet of space above the concrete skim pad on the floor for installation of ducts and access for service people to install and supply and maintain.
Final question.
Yes,
you
sir.
mentioned 12 feet. Where is 12 feet then?
That's the building on the upper section that's cut into the back is actually set into the grade. So the windows will be at approximately chest level thereabouts on the upper level, on the main floor.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Graziano, please. Thank you. And through your worship, Mr. Wright, I applaud you for working with staff throughout this process. I know it's been a lengthy one for you and for you, Mr. Skolnick. And I want to thank you both for your patience in understanding and coming together to really try to find solutions that would satisfy all parties. I understand it can be challenging at times. Mine is on. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Could you hear what I said earlier?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. My question to Mr. Skolnick and to you, Mr. Wright, is what would be the alternative should blasting not be approved today? And the root of my question is really based on the fact of the picture that I see, the view from the canoe picture that I would say on slide number 24, whereby you can just barely see the roof line of the cottage or the current cottage through the tree line there. And I wonder if, hypothetically speaking, blasting not be approved today, you would be forced to assume, I assume, to build up, in which case the cottage would very much be visible. from the view of the canoe, as well as if in the event that you are forced to build up, would you be seeking a basement and storage space and or livable space as part of the basement going forward? Over to the two of you. Thank you.
Mr. Wright, if I may address first.
Certainly.
I think it's a multifaceted question. I don't think I'll let Mr. Wright speak to what his choices would be, but as it relates to being compliant, if this isn't approved, the building is not compliant with the variance for which it has been approved twice, as it would be not in keeping with the approved heights. The theoretical process of a third variance to obtain permission to build in the same footprint without question would necessitate setting a base pillar height at the highest point of bedrock at the 20-meter mark, setting that as a platform and building up, which again I could quantify, but roughly speaking would add, I don't know, 6 feet approximately of height at a bare minimum, plus structural requirements of floor thicknesses, footings and piers, so probably 8+ feet to the height. The ability to have a patio out front, which is naturalized and at grade, would be unfeasible. So there would need to be an additional request for a built structure such as a deck, which would have more impact. I don't know about the question pertaining to a basement. I have my hesitations whether or not Mr. Wright would proceed with anything, considering we commenced this process many, many years ago, and we're both hoping to cross the finish line today. So I'll let Mr. Wright speak to that.
Well, I think Dave has captured the essential point, which is that we would not be able to retain the view from the canoe. You'd end up with a cottage that's sticking out like a pimple. And that is very specifically what we did not want. We like the idea of a cottage hiding in behind the trees along the shoreline, which we fully intend to maintain. No, I don't wish to have a basement. The lot would enable us to have a larger cottage. I don't want a larger cottage. So I appreciate the question, but the whole design becomes something other than feasible if that were to happen.
It does, and thank you, Mr. Wright, for your answer, Mr. Spolnick. I want to applaud you for trying to maintain the smallest possible footprint while preserving the visual aesthetic on our lake. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Predko.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. My question is directed to Director of Planning, Mr. Whitlib. When this matter came to the Committee of Adjustment last October, it has the same building that is in your presentation today, but there was no discussion of the need to blast. And I realize that the blasting bylaw is separate from a variance consideration, but I don't know that, is it not part of the full picture that could be or perhaps should be presented to the Committee of Adjustment so that they know the impact that they're approving? We received that design and the application based on the fact that it was low profile and had a good view from the canoe, even though it was a large GFA increase, but it was an overall improvement to the property. So blasting may not be considered an overall improvement to the property, and I'm just wondering what your opinion is on this.
Through the mayor, staff wholeheartedly agree. To the applicant's credit, their pre-consultation on this process with prior planning staff before the team that's here, they did indicate their need for blasting. That did not carry forward, unfortunately, through sort of the lack of continuity in terms of the corporate memory in the department to the application that was considered before the committee in October. In response, particularly with this situation brought to light, staff have now added a question on the, for example, minor variance application form and all other application forms. Is blasting part of this development proposal? So moving forward, you'll see that comprehensive and inclusive analysis of all the impacts through the application consideration process.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Jarvis, sorry, Councillor Bocek, followed by Councillor Jarvis.
Thank you. Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor, both Tom and David, thank you very much for the presentation. And I really don't have a problem with the application or the blasting. I do have a comment, perhaps, to Councillor Cooper, who we always try and keep educated on the inland. With 6 Mile Lake, Councillor Cooper, there is a fluctuation in the water other than, which you don't see in other lakes on the inland. And that's because they drain 6 Mile Lake in the wintertime down a couple of feet. And you certainly don't want the measurement made on those slow slopes during the wintertime, because that would bring your setback closer to the water's edge in the summer. So it is an important figure, the high water mark on 6 Mile Lake, just because they reduce the level of the lake during the wintertime. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cooper, you wanted to respond to that?
Yes, I guess we better check with Councillor Bianco, former Councillor Bianco, because I know about the winter drop down, but he said, you know, other than flooding in the spring, the water level is very consistent over the summer months. Whereas in lakes like Gibson, for example, it can go up significantly. In fact, they can control, as I understand it, on 6 Mile Lake, the spring flooding to a great degree because of the ability to control it. That's all I was trying to reference. And those are all the things that that councillor brought forward over the years. And I haven't misstated any of that, but that's why he said there's no high water mark. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jarvis, please.
Yeah, I want to thank all parties for all the, obviously there's a fair bit of work's gone into this, and I also appreciate the fact that after 20 meters back or from that high water mark, we don't have, there's no real need for a request for a blasting permit. However, I have a fundamental disagreement with any kind of blasting that goes on. It's a permanent scar on the landscape. And we have an owner here who has professed to want to maintain the natural state of the land, yet here he is permanently altering it. I know that, yeah, to make things fit in the context that we're looking at here, blasting seems practical, but in my mind, we come up here because of the land, and we attempt, and in most cases, build with the land in mind, and we work around the land. We don't make the land work around us. As I said, I have a fundamental disagreement with any blasting in any situation. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any further comments or questions, so I'm going to read the motion, which is moved by Councillor Predko, seconded by Councillor Cooper. Be it resolved that Council receive the report regarding the blasting permit application for 134 Echo Bay Road, and the Council have considered the provisions of blasting bylaw 2016-064 and any public comments received before or during the meeting of Planning Council held on May 14th, 2024. And the blasting permit application 2401 for Wright for lands located at 143 Echo Bay Road be approved, and that the applicant and municipal law enforcement staff be advised of Council's decision under the Director of Planning's signature. All those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 5 in favor, 2 not. That is carried. Thank you. And our final, whatever we're planning application staff reports, is application C 2004-02 for the M5V Lone Pine Inc. Extension of draft plan approval, Edgewater, Muskoka. Director Whitlib, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the committee, I'll try and be brief. I believe that staff report is comprehensive. This is a development, an existing draft approved development that was picked up by the current owner, I believe approximately 2 years ago, after a period of inactivity. The new owner has however, been very aggressively and productively moving towards draft plan approval. They are almost there. The condominium, they have draft plan approval. They're moving towards final approval. The condominium agreement was recently signed. We're in the process of receiving securities. They've just run out of a little bit of runway on their current draft plan approval. So staff are recommending a 1-year extension. We do not believe they need a year. I think it's a matter of a month or two before they're there, but just with an abundance of caution. The applicants have requested a 2-year extension, which is the normal practice. But again, staff are recommending 1 year. Ultimately, it is up to the District of Muskoka to determine what that time period will be. But again, this is a development, 22 single detached residential dwellings on a common condominium road that is very near to final approval, and the developer has been actively and in a timely way working to get to that finish line. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Council, any comments or questions? While you're contemplating that, I will read the motion, which is moved by Councillor Hazelton, seconded by Councillor Graziano. Be it resolved that the Township of Georgian Bay supports the extension of draft plan of subdivision approval for Edgewater Muskoka Estates, application C 2004-02, for a maximum period of 12 months, and that the District of Muskoka, being the approval authority, be advised of the Township's recommendation. All those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That is carried unanimously. And with that, we're going into the staff reports section of our Planning Council meeting. And this is the Environmental Consulting Services contract. Director Whitlib, please.
Thank you. Through the Mayor to Planning Council, Hutchison Environmental Services has been providing peer review environmental services to the township for 2 years under contract, and their contract has lapsed, but they've continued to provide it, and we're into almost 3 years now. The options before us are to do an RFP to seek out services once again, or act on a provision that was included in Council's motion when they granted the contract to Hutchison over 2 years ago, which the motion at the time in 2020 provided for an automatic renewal if it's in our interest, in the township's interest. Staff have been quite satisfied with Hutchison's work. The rates are competitive. The timeliness, in particular, turnaround in terms of peer reviews has been very succinct, and the quality of the peer reviews has been good. So what staff are requesting is that, notwithstanding the procurement bylaw, which would trigger an RFP, that we take council up on the option that was included in their 2020 motion for an automatic renewal provision and do a one-time 2-year automatic renewal. At this point, it's anticipated by staff that at the end of that 2-year period, we would engage the full RFP process as per the procurement bylaw. Those are my comments, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. And the hands are going up. So we'll start with Councillor Jarvis, please.
Yeah, thank you for the report. The contract expired in February of 2023. We grant a 2-year extension. Are we really only giving them a 1-year extension? Does that 2-year include the 1 year that's already gone?
I'm going to look to the treasurer, but from staff standpoint, I would recommend, considering they've been working without a contract since February, that the 2023, that the extension be be granted from the date of the execution of the new contract. So a full 2 years is what I would recommend.
I appreciate the clarification. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cooper, please.
A couple of questions, Director Whitlib. First of all, why do we need a contract? Can you hear me?
The question is, why do we need a contract?
Thank you. So again, these are services provided, third-party services provided. So pursuant to the procurement bylaw, in this case, they should be under contract.
Okay, I guess. We consult lawyers, but we don't have contracts with them in some cases. I'm a bit confused by this. In any event, the other question I sort of commented, I would have hoped that this might have gone out. I don't think you said we basically been satisfied with the work. My observation is that the firm does good work, but their knowledge is very limited to Muskoka. The understanding of Georgian Bay is less than good in my view. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Graziano.
Thank you, Worship. I'm wondering whether the clerk can turn on closed captioning for the audience at home to be able to read Councillor Cooper's comments, because I'm having a really tough time hearing him as well. A question with regards to the vendors in which we support, not necessarily perhaps an answer that Mr. Whitlib may be able to answer, but perhaps a consideration for all of council and staff going forward, specifically in renewing contracts with vendors. And forgive me, if memory serves me correctly, and I may be incorrect in my memory as I age, cognitive decay occurs, but I wonder whether Hutchinson provided testimony counter to the municipality's position in the OBD matter at OLT. If not, then this comment may not be directed at Hutchinson. If so, then it is essentially a part of my concern in that the vendors that we choose to work with, we should not be supporting those vendors that then choose to oppose us when we go to matters before the OLT or any judicial body. And I wonder whether we reconcile that or we find ways in which to ensure that those that we do work with have supported us in the past. Again, this may not be relevant to today's conversation, rather just a general statement. But I am concerned. I do recall in the most recent matter, there was a vendor of ours, and I'll have to look back as to who that was that did, essentially provide testimony counter to our position, and that is concerning. That if we're going to continue to, fund their march forward, that we do so with companies that support us. Thank you.
Was there a question for somebody in there?
General statement. Thank you.
Councillor Bochek, please.
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Similar to the conversation that was just had, this is a repeated process that the township is put through. And I'll use Tatham as an example, where Tatham would oppose us at an OLT hearing, yet we use them at the Leduc site for doing our engineering. So not that we need to have this conversation here today, but I think it would be a valuable conversation for us to have at the council table moving forward. Thank you.
Councillor Cooper, you have an additional remark?
Yes, Mayor, and I understand you can hear me somewhat. I just would like to point out that I have not changed any of my equipment at all. Been using the same equipment for 2 or 3 years, and for some reason you're having trouble hearing me. Not sure what's going on, maybe in your facility. I can't understand why I am making any difference at my end. Thank you.
Obviously, I'm not a technician, so I can't answer you, Councillor Cooper, on that, but you do sound a little differently today than you normally do when you've zoomed in. So something has changed somewhere, but I don't know what.
Let's say not at my end at the moment. Thank you.
Are there any other comments or questions with regards to this application? Sorry, this report. I have moved by Councillor Cooper, seconded by Councillor Hazelton. Be it resolved that council authorize staff to enter into a contract with Hutchinson Environmental Sciences Limited to be the primary environmental consultant for the Development Services Department for a 2-year term. Councillor Hazelton?
Sorry, I'm asleep at the wheel. I apologize for that. But we've heard two councillors bring up the concept of a consultant who may go against us. And I'm wondering, in the process of crafting the contract, if there could be an expectation set that that they would align themselves with our township and not represent alternate opinions at formal bodies. I mean, is that a possibility as we go through this contract phase?
Director Whitman.
If I may, I think the distinction in here is, and I stand to be corrected, is so where the township has a consultant of record. So, for example, we use Hutchinson to do all our environmental review on behalf of the township as a whole, or we use Ainley and Associates as an example. They are the township's engineer of record. They do all our engineering review for us. Where they are the the engineer of record, or excuse me, the consultant of record for the township, the contract provisions would not allow them to also do private sector work within the township. I think the distinction I heard with the example that was provided was where the township has retained a consultant, has retained at times consultants to do project specific work. So that consultant is not the consultant of record for the entire township. So in circumstances like that, and that's a separate discussion as how, you know, council and the township wishes to administer that, but that may be a situation where you have a consultant that's both doing private work in the township, project specific, but also doing township work, project specific. But where they are the blanket consultant, as Hutchinson in this case, or I use the example of Ainley Associates as our engineer, they are not, in the contract provisions do not allow them to do private work for private clients in the township at the same time.
But I wonder if I could just follow up on that. We know if the township staff make a recommendation to council and council decides otherwise, and we've had OLT hearings in that regard, and then basically we know in those situations our staff cannot go and represent what council has directed because they've already expressed a contrary opinion. My question is, where would that leave Hutchinson's if their opinion was also, let me call it, was behind this township recommendation that council did not accept? Or would they be, shall we call it, forced to step back the way township staff has, or are they forced to express their opinion if the OLT calls them?
Through the mayor. So in a situation like that, where there's a staff recommendation or a consultant's recommendation, there's a decision by the township that's different than that, and the matter lands at the OLT. Under a circumstance like that, if staff, for example, were served a summons by the appellant, staff would have to appear at the OLT and speak to their evidence and their position. Similarly, using Hutchinson as an example, if they were served a summons by a party to the hearing, they too would have to appear, and they'd be obligated to give their evidence as it is, right?
And I think we have to be very clear that we cannot expect somebody to I don't know. I want to word this carefully, but I'm not sure I have the right wording. But we set aside their professional standards or opinions, even if it's not in agreement with what the eventual council decision on that particular case. Councillor Gratiano.
Thank you, Your Worship. And if I can draw a distinction here, I think in Hutchinson's case, and I want to formally apologize, it was Tatham that was the vendor that that we work with while in parallel was a witness to the defense, or excuse me, the applicant in the OLT matter. But to draw a distinction, I think in Hutchinson's situation, if they were called to the OLT, they would likely have to provide the same information that they provided staff and not deviate from that. Whereas in other situations where we work with a project-specific vendor who then goes on to support a matter that we are defending at a large cost, I think that in itself says enough as to who we're working with. And we should not be working with companies that go to essentially counter our position, and that's, I think, that it's a fair expectation. We're not saying anything that's abnormal, and in the private sector, I could not imagine any private companies working with companies that then go to shoot themselves in the foot or their clients in the foot. So as a result, I think in this situation, Hutchinson, based on what I'm hearing today, is a great vendor, and I would support Mr. Whitlieb's report here today and request. Thank you.
All right, with that discussion, I'm going to read the motion again, and that is moved by Councillor Cooper, seconded by Councillor Hazelton. Be it resolved that council authorize staff to enter into a contract with Hutchinson Environmental Sciences Limited to be the primary environmental consultant for the Development Services Department for a 2-year term. All those in favor? 1, 2. And that is passed unanimously. And just in time for a break, I have moved by Councillor Graziano, seconded by Councillor Bocek. Be it resolved, the Planning Council adopt bylaw 2024-046 to confirm the proceedings of the May 14th, 2024 council meeting.
Mayor, just before we get to that.
Yes.
I wanted to just roll back the clock a little bit, and there's been some dialogue on a matter that we discussed earlier, and this is the Vincent Cartier issue with the request. And so the back and forth that I wanted to highlight for my fellow councillors is at Committee of Adjustment, I attempted to deal with this issue of dollars in lieu of parkland and things like that. And we at the Committee of Adjustment were told that matter had to come to council. And now we are at council and we are told that it has to go back to Committee of Adjustment. And so I'm not loving the matter, but I would like us to, as council, provide some direction to staff to waive any fees associated with another appearance and to put it on an agenda ASAP so that we can deal with this matter expeditiously, so that we're not kind of ping-ponging back and forth as to where, who does what, where, and how kind of thing. So I would ask if there is some process that we can exercise here at council before we adjourn this planning council meeting to affect that outcome.
I'm going to have to turn that over to the professionals, who are, one of whom is busy writing. Director Whitlieb.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hazelton. I heard commentary. I think I heard the question. I'm not sure, but I'll try and answer it. So because there'd be no recirculation or anything else involved here, there would be no additional fee to the applicant for it to come back to Committee of Adjustment. So there are no fees to waive.
And it's just a matter of putting it on the agenda and.
Correct. What we anticipate as we're discussing it here is that the matter would come back to the June Committee of Adjustment meeting.
Yes.
A staff report speaking to the matter. It would not be a public hearing, but it'd be a staff report speaking to the matter and making a recommendation pursuant to council's request.
Okay, I don't want to make a big deal. I just don't want to get lost in another ping pong session. And so what you've provided is good enough from my perspective. So I don't think.
When you were much younger, didn't you enjoy ping pong?
I'm into badminton now.
Okay. Well, on Saturday, you're supposed to be into pickleball. Just saying.
What's a pickle?
Uh, Moved by Councillor Graziano, seconded by Councillor Bocek. Be it resolved that Planning Council adopt bylaw 2024-046 to confirm the proceedings of the May 14th, 2024 council meeting. All those in favor? And that is carried. Moved by Councillor Jarvis, seconded by Councillor Pretko. Be it resolved that Planning Council does now adjourn at 11 o'clock a.m. until June 4th, 2024 at 9 a.m. or to call the chair. All those in favor? And that is carried. And now the only question is, when do we do committee of the whole? Yeah, so we'll start committee of the whole at 11:15. How's that? Because it's a separate link, I believe, is it not? Okay, so see you all again at 11:15.